Thank you all for joining today. I am very excited to talk about this topic. As I was telling Linda before you all joined, I was actually mentored by a fabulous other master gardener who lives down the street from me. She's on 5 acres and her property is an oasis. And when she told me what she did, I just was like, there's no way, just some mulch and a little bit of attention and everything can be that beautiful. And sure enough, I've been working on our yard in Novato for several years, and I'm just constantly amazed at how I keep finding areas within my yard that I'm like, oh, I can do this if I put some compost down and pay a little attention to it. So this is presentations based on my experience, and almost all of the pictures in here are actually from my property. So here we go, between the sheets. And before we start, we are the Master Gardeners, and we offer a lot of advice at the farmers markets when we are able to participate in those. And then also have an office down in Novato that we answer. We have a help desk and answer questions. We are all non-paid members of the University of California Cooperative Extension, and we our answers are always based on research and other home horticulture, pest management, and sustainable landscape practices. So our mantra is to find the best way to provide a solution to the home gardener. So what we're going to cover today, why sheet mulch, a success story, which is my success story, the process, timing. We're going to highlight lasagna composting, partly because when I was doing research for this, it frequently came up. If you put in sheet mulching in a Google search, lasagna composting comes up as well. But I do think there's a distinction between the two, but I will go over that towards the end. There are many saving opportunities we'll talk about, and answering questions. And that is actually my property from the back. That's our barn, converted barn and backyard. So why is sheet mulch? So I think the biggest thing to figure out is what do you want to do? It is an opportunity to redo a landscaped area. You can do lawn replacement, which is the first project that I did. And this actually is a picture of what my front yard looked like. You can use it to mitigate weeds and create a better planting environment. And so what I mean by creating a better planting environment is that by sheet mulching, you can improve your soil. For my scenario, it broke up a lot of clay and sand and just really bad soil that I had in the front yard. There are ways to save money, time, and water. Again, my front yard, as we'll see in a few pictures from now, the ground was so hard and so bad that when I did try to use water or use sprinklers, it would just run off. It wouldn't get absorbed. So it was a waste of that. And also, despite the fact that it wasn't that great of a lawn, I found that it was spending more time focusing on what I was doing to this thing that wasn't that pretty than I do now with a beautiful landscaped front yard. And also habitat. I have a lot more bees, butterflies, birds. That bird is actually in my backyard. There's several of them that show up now. So it's been amazing, the transformation with having just done a little bit of work. And time, actually, another thing I should mention is my weeding has gone down tremendously with this whole process. So I'm thrilled about that too. So success story before, and I had a really hard time finding pictures because it was so ugly. I didn't really take pictures except for, those are my girls probably about 5 years ago on their first day to school. And as you can see behind that, it was just terrible. And given the time of year, part of it had to do with the fact that we were doing a lot to conserve water. So I wasn't watering it a whole lot anyway, but it had crabgrass, it had Bermuda grass, it was clay, it was rock, it was a mess. And then the photo on the other side is when we decided, okay, let's try to do something. and my something still wasn't very exciting or very much. So on that one picture with to the left is what I was trying to do. I started spray painting, trying to figure out where I would lay stuff out, trying to figure out what I was gonna do. And the reason I say I did it twice is I finally kind of figured out, I went through the sheet mulching process, did everything, got it all beautiful. My neighbors were hugely impressed. And then my septic tank was in the front where you can see there on the left, and it failed. And so to the right, that photo is them digging everything up after I had redone it. And you can kind of see at the front of that photo, I did do some flagstone hardscape in the front to create like a little sitting area. I should have prefaced this. We're on a 1/2 acre property, so we have a lot of space, or a lot of usable space. So I went through all of this process of sheet mulching, getting it beautiful and everything planted. And then I had to have it all dug up. And to add to everything, that, I don't know if you guys can see, but that guy is in one of the holes. So I had these massive holes dug into our front yard, and all that dirt and everything was just, it was awful. So when they put everything back, the way that they did it, it ended up being even more clay. It was just a mess. So I was devastated. But I can say that things came around, and it's beautiful. I'll show you at the end of what it looks like now, or at least I'm told it looks beautiful, and I think it looks beautiful. So how did I get there? This would be me with borrowing a whole bunch of, or not borrowing, but getting cardboard from friends, really thick, heavy cardboard, layering it out. The first time I did it was, I always laugh because I had 2 Girl Scout troops, and I was also a cookie mom. And there were a lot of those cases that the cookies would come in. And so my front lawn was covered in Thin Mint, Samoa, and all kinds of cookie boxes, because I was using as much cardboard as I could get my hands on to put out my front lawn. And then when I started planting stuff, I would find the cookie patterns and stuff. So I always remember that for timing, because that was about January, February that I was doing that. And then this must have been somewhere along the line then too. And then when I did it again, it was later in the season, but we'll talk about timing too. So this was one of my, I can't tell by the photos if this was the first go around or the second go around, but this is where I started filling in. After the cardboard, I used compost and put my irrigation down and started planting a lot of habitat plants. And this is what it looks like today. Again, we're actually on a corner lot. I have a little video, which I haven't tried from here, but let me see if I can get this to work so you can see. Can everybody see that, or Linda? Okay. So that is the end result of what it looks like now. Oops. And so in addition to doing the front, I started, I did the front later than I did this, but this is where I first started thinking, okay, what can I do so that I don't have weeds, everything's manageable, and I can have usable space. So I go back to if you're going to sheet mulch, what is the outcome that you want? Because it depends on what you do. And I say that, meaning that I've used wood chips here because I didn't want to necessarily plant anything. I just wanted an area where we could have a sitting area, or we could have, my kids are teens now, but I could have, people over, and there wouldn't be a lot of maintenance. and I didn't need to have water use either. We were trying to, at this point, trying to mitigate our water use. And so this is just getting those wood chips from a local landscape company and laying them out. And this was probably done about 10 years ago, and this was this summer. I still don't get weeds there. We do refresh using mulch every so often, but there aren't any weeds in this area. This is another view of that same area. And then as you see, my yard actually goes back to that's a doghouse up in the left upper portion of that. So our property extends onto that. And again, another shot of our backyard, same concept with compost just being laid down. The photo to the right doesn't need to be weeded. I've got a lot of habitat plants there. It actually, because of how good the soil is now, it actually gets to be bigger than, the plants end up to be larger than it says on the container it will get. So something that's usually at 2 feet will get to be 3 or 4 feet because it's just really loves the soil now that I've taken a lot of care, and we keep adding compost to it each year. On the left is usually the amount of compost I get. I usually get about 7 or 8 yards from my property. And we'll talk about in a little bit when we talk about how you do this, but it's been great. With the compost, I don't end up having an issue with weeds, but you do want to keep in mind the source that you get, whatever you're going to use, and we'll talk about that later. Because I did get a bad batch where I had a little bit of issue with other things growing than I wanted to in a certain spot. Here's another example, the chessboard that I made on the left. That used to be really bad soil and ground. The stuff that is growing around the chessboard is actually stuff I want. There is a walkable plant that I think it was thyme that I've got there. And so that too is another example of what you can sheet mulch for or use compost to change an environment. And this is where I get on the right with the roses. This is where I start going crazy with my compost, and my husband goes, "We can't get more than 7 yards this year, Diane." This picture represents the really bad yard that I still have left and how I'm kind of inching into it with putting compost down. And I stuck those roses in, and right now they're about 5 feet tall. And this is only 2 years ago. So two seasons ago. This was the second year of them blooming. And just that, I didn't do sheet mulch. I just put compost down on this really, really bad soil, and the roses just love it. Plus the full sun probably helps a lot too. And I think this is final, but you can kind of see around here, there's a lot of weeds still that I'm going to be dealing with in the next season. But this was all really just this high foxtails and just really awful weeds. And so I'm gradually moving back. There's some spots on the photo on the left that I'm repurposing and putting compost down, and they're already more diggable than the sand and clay that's been back there before. And so that's just a photo from this year of what it looks like now. So how did I do it? So the first thing that you'll want to do with whatever area you're taking a look at sheet mulching is you're going to want to cut down the weeds or whatever is there, because what I found, I wasn't really good about it because I had to do it in pockets of time. And so I would put cardboard, it would get all set and I'd put cardboard down, but it wouldn't lay really well if you had stuff growing underneath it. You also want to have the soil wet. So that when you put stuff on it, it starts to decompose rather than putting it on a dry surface and then having to get the water going through the compost or mulch that you put on top and then through the cardboard into the surface. You'll want to layer cardboard, newspaper, brown paper bags can also be used. I don't know about you, but I'm getting a lot from Trader Joe's these days because they won't let me bring my own bag anymore. But whatever you choose, the barrier should be permeable to water and air. I would say, depending on your scenario and how bad your soil or your weed situation is, The thicker you go, the better. So I actually had crabgrass and that other Bermuda grass in my front yard. I don't have it anymore, but I used cardboard and I was really good about layering it. The one thing that I found, there will be a picture at the end, in another area next to my neighbor, he's got some really bad weeds. He's got, I should have written it down. It's a wandering weed that has a really pretty morning glory like bloom on it. Binding weed, and that is that I found sheet mulching hasn't been as effective with, because it's so shallow. It ends up growing over into my yard on top of the cardboard. But everything else, it's having the heavier cardboard will definitely help you mitigate the weeds and get rid of them. And then you'll want to add 3 to 4 inches of good quality compost. As I mentioned before, I always use compost if I'm doing like weed mitigation or the front yard that I showed you at first. So 3 to 4 inches, like about this, is good. The choices that you will have will depend on where you're located. If you're here in Marin, I know that some presentations I've been on recently are from people throughout California. But here in Marin, we have a couple of good companies that can provide you with compost. Just ask them what they have and what's in it. Don't use top soil. I've had some people think, oh, we can just put topsoil. You don't want to use topsoil. You want to actually use compost. The compost I have most success with had just chicken manure in it. And so sometimes when you have something like chicken manure, and depending on how they mix everything, it can be what's considered too hot. So you have to be careful. You don't want to put that on plants that you want to keep, because it may end up causing harm or damage to it. So just be mindful of what you're actually getting and what you're doing. You can also use, instead of compost, if you're just going to have an area like the flat area that I showed earlier, you can also just use wood chips or choose something else. You don't have to have the good compost. So again, going back to the original thing is, what's the intent, or what are you trying to do with a certain area? And then you're going to want to water again. I did notice in my particular scenario, because it was sloped a little bit and because of the compost that I used in the cardboard, it took a little bit to get the water to actually sink in. It would just kind of run off because everything was just new. So it does take a little bit of time to start breaking down. That is one of the reasons why we'll talk about timing, is that you'll want to, it's typical to do this kind of thing during the fall when we would have rain, because then you don't have to pay attention. Again, I did my first go around, I did it, I probably started in December, rolled into January with finishing the front lawn area. And between the rain and everything, I just literally left it out there for like 3 months, and it broke down really nicely. But with our apparent drier climate, again, you might have to pay a little bit more attention to that this year. So some tips for how to get ready and be successful, which is what we all want, is to be successful with this. Invasives, try to get rid of those beforehand as much as possible. Dig them up. I know some have seeds to just go all over the place anyway. So, you know, you may not be able to get rid of them as much as possible, or much as you would like. But as I said, I have like 0 weeding in the front yard, you know, having done this. So it took out, you know, those foxtails and just the really bad grass too. So I've had no issues with that. Having said that, I'm going to jump to the third bullet. You need to make sure that when you're laying the cardboard down, that you're laying it and overlapping. If you have any sunlight or ability for something to peek up through there, it's going to find its way. And so that's what's tricky with some of those like Bermuda grass, or the grasses that kind of spread out a little bit more. You just need to make sure that you're covering where it's growing. And I already mentioned the water initially will run off. I didn't do it this way, but you can put plants in at the same time. I chose not to because I didn't want to have to deal with the grass coming back in those little holes. So if you wanted to put plants in at the same time, you would cut an X, or you would put the cardboard around that plant. And again, if there's any weeds or something next to that plant, then it's just going to grow with the plant. So back to my statement, it depends on what you're looking for. If you don't care if there's some stuff that could be growing back, it's okay. Or if there is stuff like in this picture that you want to keep and save, then just do your best to not press stuff up against like a tree, the tree trunk, because you don't want to create damage to there, but get as close as you can. And then you can hand weed or take care of the soil that's around that if stuff does start coming back. So again, what is your goal? This is another picture of mine as I was creeping towards the end of my little area when I had the time and cardboard. So if you want to plant, you should probably go with compost. If you just want a blank canvas that you can just enjoy and not be dealing with, then you can do mulch, and you can also do both. I could have chosen to put wood chips or something on this, but that wasn't what I was going for. Wood chips does help retain water in your ground too. If you've got plantings, because of where I live, I have a lot of trees, and it just isn't conducive to that. It's easier for me to keep the ground clear and raking by having the compost versus having mulch in this particular area. Irrigation is another thing. You can read that you can put it in underneath, like you could put it underneath the compost, but I chose to put it on top because I wanted to make sure that I've fixed any problems that I might have, and I wanted to be able to see where those lines were. And for my particular situation, everything that I was planting was going to grow over it, so I wouldn't necessarily see it anyway. And one of the big things, if you are doing a lawn replacement, is to make sure that you mark your sprinkler heads. You can get those little flags, those that they use at landscaping, or in like Peony has them. They're just a little metal stake with a flag on top, so that you know. I thought for sure I would know where they were, but when you've got all the cardboard and everything, and you've lost a lot of points of reference that you normally would have when you go out, I actually lost a couple of my sprinkler heads. It didn't matter in my situation because I wasn't going to repurpose or use those again, but just make sure that you do that before you start laying stuff down and putting soil on top. And another tip, with the water running off, you're going to want to, again, your scenario, depending on what it is, you can always dig a trench around the area that you are going to be working, so that if stuff does run off, it's not running out into the sidewalk or into your street. So be mindful of that. So that's possible too. So planting, so as I said, you can kind of see my drip irrigation that I installed. And what I did, and this is a side note to all this, so that icky lawn that I had those Rainbird pop-up sprinkler thingies. And so I ended up having somebody come out and help me because I didn't know for sure how to convert it. And I converted it so that I could have drip irrigation to save the water, to really target where I wanted to have stuff planted and watered. And it worked out great. So all this feeds off of two different prior sprinkler zones. And the plants I put in probably about 2 to 3 months after I had done the cardboard. And it was super easy by that point in time. And I felt more comfortable and confident. I only have one little area where I don't think I covered up the soil perfectly well, and I started having some grass come back, but I just put another sheet of cardboard down and kept at it, and it's not ever popped back up again. So going back to just to set the planting, as I said before, if you chose to do it before stuff starts breaking down, you would literally do like an X so in the cardboard, and then just lift up, bend the little cardboard pieces up and put your plant right in there, and then try to carefully put the cardboard back down. So timing, as I've been kind of inferring, late fall is best because you can take advantage of the rain when we have it. Spring is also great. I think the second go around I did closer to spring because our septic tank was not working for about 6 months. So we had no water in general for that long. But you can still do it at other times of year, but just be mindful that in order for this process to work and for the microorganisms to kind of start breaking stuff down, you need water. So you're going to want to have some kind of water source if you're not using the rain. And then again, can't reiterate this enough, but you have to know what you want to achieve. And so for me, I wanted to make sure that I had stuff in the ground after frost, but where it would be able to grow, and that I would have stuff in the summer that was blooming and finally getting established and stuff like that. So those were my personal goals for my front yard. But if you're not looking to plant, or if you just want to get rid of your lawn, which we're going to go into in a minute about the rebates and stuff you can get, then you may not care, or timing can be any time that's convenient. You have the time to do that.
Diane, we have a couple of questions.
Okay.
So an illustration indicates compost under the cardboard and mulch over the cardboard rather than compost, or maybe I'm misreading. So what would be a good layer?
So I did see that, and I think it might be coming, or I might have skipped over it. I saw that in some of the information that I had researched. I didn't need it. So I would say that if you want to use compost and then put cardboard and then put mulch, all the better. You're going to get really good soil. I chose to, just because of my particular situation and the grass and everything, I decided I wanted to do the cardboard, get everything down, and then I invested more in making sure that the compost on top was thick. And so that it just, and that's most of my yard. My whole thing is 3 to 4 inches of compost all over my yard, and my soil has been great. And just everything, it just grows so much better. So you can do that. And yes, you can find information that says you should do that first, but in my particular case, I did not.
And one more question. What about black plastic over or under the cardboard when you are replacing lawn?
So black plastic, you can always do it. As a master gardener, I wouldn't advise it, because you want to actually have water going into your ground. And so by using black plastic, it's going to kill everything underneath, but you won't be able to do anything with it. And then you're going to get a lot of runoff too. And I don't think, if you want to do any of the cost saving measures, it was for a lawn, correct?
Lawn.
If you want to do any of the rebates, they won't let you do that through the water district programs, partly because they really want the earth to capture the water, and when you put plastic on, it doesn't. And again, you're going to have runoff too. And so, not knowing this scenario, it probably isn't the best. And I have not done that. I've used weed cloth in a couple of places. That back area where I have the wood chips, there's one, and I don't even remember why I did it. We've morphed our yard so many times, and my husband's like, "You want another fence?" I'm like, "Yeah, I want another fence." Because I'm going to do this special, like I have a monarch butterfly area that I've been trying to do. So there's one area that I have used weed cloth. But other than that, I wouldn't recommend.
Thanks.
Okay, so I'm just gonna take a peek at my notes here really quick. Oh, so I have another reference. I know I mentioned wait until after frost for replanting. So if you are planting, if that's one of the things that you want to do with the area that you're trying to sheet mulch, I definitely, especially with the temperatures being so wacky around here, I've already had a ton of frost. So you just a heads up that you wouldn't want to put something in, even though the compost is hot. In fact, I forgot, I might have another picture of, oh no, I guess this is my second one here. My kids think it's hilarious. I get these big old things of compost delivered and it just steams. I mean, it looked like a sauna actually in my front yard for a while because the heat from the compost was just, it was just incredibly massive. So there is some benefits to the fact that it will be warm, but you really don't want to plant anything if there's frost on the horizon, because it's just gonna you're gonna reduce your chances of being successful with your plantings. And I have too that annuals, versus perennials. I have a lot of evergreen and perennial plants in my particular situation, so I was mindful of the timing for that too. So as I've kind of inferred, I did research some additional information. I have my experience, but we always want to have good resources for the community to go back to. And one of the ones that I found was is actually on the Marin Master Gardener website. It led me to lawntogarden.org, and it was really cool. There was a sheet mulch garden party handbook, and there's also a YouTube video that you can find there. So I highly recommend, if you want more information, to go there and take a look. The thing to the left is my little emerald, the Wizard of Oz emerald, I'm blanking, Emerald City thing that I've done too with my kids. So as I mentioned at the start, if you look up sheet mulching, you'll also come across lasagna composting. And again, I really think that this is different, but I wanted to touch on it because it does come up frequently. And the concept is similar, but the purpose and intent is different. So whereas sheet mulching is more about, I think fundamental reason was to get rid of lawns. The transition from trying to be more mindful about water usage here in California. It's primarily, the focus is more leaning towards that, whereas lasagna composting is about gardening and improving, like you see here, the garden beds. So it's a layering of same kind of concept. You're going to be layering the cardboard newspaper that's wet and add manure or compost, and then topping with nitrogen, which are your leaves, straw, bark, and other carbon materials. Similar to like if you have like a composting bin that you rotate, you're going to be mindful of what you're putting into a layered composting, lasagna composting container or box. You would add the nitrogen, which is kitchen scraps, green manure or green produce manure, and weeds. I gotta say too, one of the reasons if you decide to take on doing the sheet mulching project of your front yard, a lot of the compost that you can get now are done with the green waste cans. And so you've got to be mindful and make sure that they're heat treated, that the company that you purchase from, the heat treatment is at a sufficient level to make sure that those seeds are killed. That is one of the reasons I had an issue with, I had topsoil at one point. Oh, I did a garden remake over at one of our schools, and wasn't really thinking, and I decided to get topsoil, and it was the worst thing I did. It came with a whole bunch of stuff that I didn't want to have growing, and so It was just one of those slip of the mind. I should have known better. I have a preferred product that I used and I just was being lazy. So just make sure that when you are doing whatever you're doing, that you're not introducing something that you don't want to have introduced. And same thing with the wood chips. You can get, we're going to talk about this in a minute. You can get wood chips delivered to you from a chip, chipping companies. Some that are more reputable can actually tell you what is in there. And you'll want to make sure that it's not something that you're transferring. If you're trying to get rid of weeds and you bring in wood chips, that it's full of some Scotch broom or something that you don't want to have introduced into your yard either. So it's a layering concept, like a lasagna. You cover, after you do those layers, and you do another layer of carbon, continue to add into layers. So as you see by the garden box here, it's just a process where you're basically developing your soil for what you're going to be planting. Here, it could have a tendency to get too wet. For me, where I am, I can't do this because we have, I'm an unincorporated Marin, and so, or unincorporated Novato. And so anything that I put in like this would just get torn up and dug up, because if there's any kind of food, I threw out some coffee filters in my green can and left it open the other day, and the raccoons were in those the next day. So, and also you need to be mindful of what you are putting, because you could get flies, which is not pleasant either. So some nitrogen sources. These are my, I use a lot of my sources for my chickens. The coffee grounds I mentioned. Actually, coffee grounds are great if you do drink coffee. They're really great in your garden. Alfalfa pellets. See, I wouldn't. This was from a source. The fresh weeds, you just have to be really careful. I was actually working the help desk one time, and someone goes, they called in, they go, I have all these weeds in my yard, and I'm wondering, can I put them in my smoothie? So there are some good weeds that you can, that are fine, and they're not going to propagate and go bonkers in your newly sheet mulch area or your composting spot, but I would be mindful of what you are putting there. Vegetable scraps, grass, and all those other things there listed. And then your carbon are leaves, pine needles. I actually have a lot of pine needles, newspaper, straw. So those are your carbon sources for the lasagna composting. So this is where we talk about your money saving opportunities. And so for where I am, I want to go back actually just one second. So with this lasagna composting, keep in mind too, as stuff breaks down, it's going to shrink down. So this box, you're probably going to need to do it for a little bit of time, because it's going to start flattening out, and then you'll want to put more and it'll flatten out some more too. Okay, so if you want to save some money, or well, you indirectly would save money anyway, but if you want, there are many opportunities through our local water districts for turf replacement. So cash for grass is offered through the North Marin Water District, which is what I'm a part of, and what I actually applied for and used. Great program, great guy. I double checked before, just to make sure this information was on their website still, but I called to make sure that it was still active, and he said that yes, it is. And so essentially what I had done was Ryan Grisso from North Marin Water came over. He looked at the area. I told him what I was doing. There was an application process. As you'll see on this slide, there's a qualified plant list. So if you're going to be replanting, the one thing that I will say with regards to what I was able to do, at the start, there was that hardscaped area that was allowed only because I have so much property. So there are some restrictions, but if you want it, if you're in North Marin Water District's water area, then you can take a look at what they have to offer and their application. It was super easy. I saved my receipts, I turned them in, and they gave me back money. So it was a very simple thing. Lawn Be Gone is an alternative program, and this would be for those who want to do this but don't have, they want the supplies given to them, and so they would provide the cardboard, sources for wood chips, and this is more of a, I would say probably if you're just solely just want to have your lawn gone and nothing added on, this is a good alternative too. Marin Municipal Water also has a program, Landscape Your Lawn. Landscape Your Lawn. I'm not as familiar with that, but the link is at the bottom there, marinwater.org, if you would like to learn more about that, on how you might be able to get some money back for doing the turf replacement. There is also one through the state of California. Here again, this was a little bit tricky. I ended up not doing this option. I don't know how it is currently. I didn't go through and try to look at the application again, but it's saveourwater.org. And the reason that it's a little more tricky was that at the time that I did this the first time, there was certain requirements, and it was similar a little bit to the North Marin Water District. I had to say that I got how much lawn was I going to get rid of? What was I going to plant instead? If I had hardscape, how was I mitigating? They want a certain amount of, back to the whole thing about the plastic, we need to make sure that the water is actually going back into the ground. So they had their own requirements, which were fine for my purpose. With the state one, some of the things included, I had to plant a tree. Well, there was no way. I mean, I already have a ton of trees in the front, and I wasn't like a regular suburban, plot where I could just put a tree up. It didn't make sense for where I was. And so there were a couple of things that I couldn't use this particular rebate for, but it was a great opportunity. And actually, I believe a couple of people in my Master Gardener class applied and received a rebate for that. So that's another money saving opportunity for you too. So again, we covered today were the two methods to sheet mulch and compost, when it is best to do it, some incentives. And then hopefully I've got you all inspired to tackle your own projects. And as I mentioned at the start, or maybe somewhere in the middle, this is a picture on the left of my neighbor's house. And he's actually cleaned up the property quite a bit. But I don't know if you can see the calla lilies, they're kind of like right smack dab in the picture. That's sort of where our property line is. And it's a lot. I mean, we've had so much happen in our front yard. Last year, we had this massive oak tree fall, just collapsed, took out our power lines and all kinds of fun stuff. And so now that area is all sunny. And I'm like, there's a lot of weeds coming from next door. I've got compost. Let me start sheet mulching. So I started sheet mulching that area. And the other picture you can kind of see, I didn't put a lot of effort into it, but I've already got a ton of stuff growing, and the neighbors are now coming in and like, wow, that didn't take that long to turn out like that. I'm like, nope. And I should add that because of where I am, I have deer and all kinds of wildlife coming through my yard, and I can now pretty much tell you what a deer will and won't eat. They do eat almost everything, but a lot of my stuff is evergreen habitat, deer proof. Mostly deer will still eat flowers and stuff that's poisonous, but that's my next or continuing project that I've got coming. So there's my yard. Any questions?
There is a question. Someone has oxalis and they put cardboard over it 5 years ago, but it looks like it came back. Is this an ongoing project forever, or? What would be good to do?
So oxalis is really tricky. I actually have a friend who's asking me the same thing, probably about a year ago. The thing with that is that I took a seminar once about it, and I was just like flabbergasted. The way that the plant grows, the roots spread out for like, you know, quite a distance from where the plant. So you can have like a little plant and the roots could be like a foot or two away, and it has all these little nodules on it. And so even when you take it out, we actually have a small patch of it in my backyard that I still haven't touched. And I try to just constantly pull it up. And so it hasn't gotten really big. We've been there for, I think, 17 years. So with that, I think, oh, and I don't think I mentioned the seeds also apparently, they live for a really long time. It's not the easiest thing to get rid of, but you should be able to get it to more of a controllable place. But if you've got a patch of oxalis that you can see, I would make sure that you go way beyond it if you can. So even though you just see it in one spot, because those roots extend out, I would do the cardboard in a greater span around where you are to make sure that you got everything. And I don't think I said it, or maybe not strongly enough, but see this picture right here. I mean, I really don't get any weeds, but if I do get something, what I actually frequently get now is a lot of the stuff I picked will self-sow. And so I'll have something pop up somewhere else that is from what I planted. It's not a weed. Well, the weed is just a plant that you don't want somewhere, but it's so easy to pull out. So if you've got a decent, you've got good soil, stuff is easier to pull up. So I don't know if that answered it. I mean, I guess there's hope, but it's a hard one. I'll confess to that. That one in the bindweed that I've got actually. So on this, oh, you probably can't see it, but he's got foxtails. He's got some, I don't even know this one weed. It's just got a zillion little seed pods on it. And then the binding weeds all keeps just coming in, and I'm having a hard time with that. But this, I haven't touched this, and there's no weeds on my side now. So it's doable, but that might take a little bit more effort.
So would that work on ivy as well?
I haven't done ivy. I do think he actually has ivy too. He has the blue periwinkle, which the name's escaping me right now. He's got a lot of stuff that will just grow no matter what. But yeah, I would try it. I mean, that with ivy, I would say you dig up as much as you can at first, and it won't, if you've got the cardboard and stuff breaking down, it's not going to come up really after that. But make sure you get the.
Oh, sorry.
I was just saying, I would just make sure that you pull up a lot of it before. I mean, so you can kind of see, so where the compost, the darker part is, that whole area on the other side of it used to be ivy and, vinca. He's got vinca too, which is also tremendously difficult to get rid of. But over the years, you just have to be a little bit more on top of than other stuff. Like my foxtails are all gone, the crabgrass, all the icky grasses and stuff. Haven't seen them at all.
And a question about how long you can leave a sheet mulched area unplanted.
Oh.
Is a year too long?
No, you can totally do that. I mean, what I'm going to do, I mean, it's just going to continue to break down. You don't have to do anything to it if you want, but what I do, so I had a little blank for a minute about what time of the year it is because it's been so nice. I will probably bring in more mulch around March and put more mulch back onto this area that you see, just to keep it going. But you don't have to do anything. It'll just break down and continue to be okay. If you've got clay, hard clay, it will probably start to it'll break down, but then it won't. You'll lose some of the momentum if you don't do something like add more stuff on top of it.
And one more question. I have a dog run area that my dog uses as its toilet. The area usually has a lot of weeds appear in the spring. Can I lay newspapers on the ground with pebbles or granite mulch on top of the newspapers?
To get rid of the weeds.
I assume.
Well, if you have a dog, well, I was thinking because I would think that would probably, but I don't think it's going to get rid of them as much as you would like. You could do like maybe not a heavy cardboard. I would do like something a little bit heavier and then put the rocks on. So that would be my solution for that particular scenario.
Those are all the questions. Someone had a good comment at the beginning that Mike's Bikes in Novato has a lot of good cardboard.
I know people told me Costco, Lala Roo. I don't know if I say that right. My girlfriend sold, like anybody that sells that kind of stuff. I think a lot of people are willing to give you cardboard. Oh, I should probably also mention, so a lot of mine came with, heavy packing tape on it. And I didn't take it off because I would literally, at the time I started this, I think my kids were, like 9 and 11 or something. And they were really just keeping me busy. So I would just take pockets of time and run out and put cardboard down and then put my compost on, and I'd keep moving across. But so sometimes I didn't even bother to take the labels or the tape off. It obviously isn't, the tape is not going to like break down, but what was great was as stuff broke down, I could just go and pick the tape up and just throw it away. So you can always put it down with everything on it if you want. But again, it goes back to what you're doing. I don't know that if for my particular situation, it didn't matter if the tape was still there. I was just going to deal with it later. But if you were doing a garden box or something, you might want to take the tape off first.
I forgot a question that was mentioned earlier. I read you shouldn't use corrugated cardboard because the layers are held together with glue, which may be toxic. What are your thoughts?
That would be new to me. I would have to say I don't know. I hadn't heard that. But it seems odd because that's what the water district uses that they provide it. So unfortunately, I don't have an answer to that. Anything else?
I think that's all of them now. So for people who came in a little bit later into the presentation, I have recorded it and it will be on the Marin County Free Library website, YouTube website in about a week. I'll send a link.
Great. And just for references, I'll leave this up so that you can have the information. The Lawn to Garden, I think, was the one that has all the great information, and it can also be found on the Marin Master Gardeners website. So hopefully that was helpful and you guys are ready to go out and do your own project. Yeah.
Oh, great. Thank you all very much for attending. Oh, can you recommend places to get good compost?
So the compost that I have used for years, they don't make it anymore. So I'm on a hunt myself. There's American Soil in San Rafael that I used to use their Walt Whitman, but as I said before, it had chicken manure in it. I loved it, but they found that people didn't know how to use it. And so they were getting a lot of complaints that it was burning plants and ruining their garden. So they've switched to, I don't remember, I think it's like a horse combination. I think it's cow and horse or something. There's Marin Colored Gravel. Marin Landscape has a couple of choices. There's also a new, Linda, I don't know if you know, I want to say West Marin Compost or something. There's a new revamped company that I actually, this last time, so I was trying to get my compost before the shelter in place hit, and I started freaking out because everything started shutting down. So I just called up and got them to deliver a whole bunch. And I don't even remember, but I think is it West Marin?
It might be Sonoma Compost in Nicasio, someone types in.
No, it wasn't that. It's this new, I heard it's like a combination of two companies and it's new. I think it's West Marin Compost. They have a website, but you know, again, those are all great locations. That I think the bigger thing is to find out what is in it and what you're getting. I tend to lean towards stuff that has the chicken manure. I think one of the choices that I found was goat. I don't like cow and horse manure as much, and I try to stay away from the green can, the stuff that has a lot of the green can waste in it, just because I don't know 100% what I'm getting. Going all the way
West
back to
Marin
this.
Compost in Point Reyes Station.
That sounds, they were super nice. I got it right before they closed everything down. The guy came tried to give me a receipt and not touch anything, and he put it on my mailbox, and I'm like, that's fine, it's good.
Well, great. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate you attending. And remember that in about a week, it'll be posted so you can revisit it if you need more information. And thank you very much, Diane.
No, thank you. I'm glad I got to speak today. I had fun doing this, so thank you.
Thank you. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.